Today's episode of Lone Star Lawyers on the Varsity Podcast Network is brought to you by Varsity Search. Varsity Search builds great teams by connecting lawyers in Texas with career opportunities at small and boutique law firms. So if you're thinking of making a move or your law firm is looking to hire, please go to varsitysearch.com and book a time to visit right into my calendar. Varsity Search, building great teams. Hey everyone, Daniel Hare back with you on Lone Star Lawyers. Before we get started today, I want to let you know about a few of the opportunities that we are currently searching for. Continue to have a number of options in Dallas, both in litigation and in real estate and in construction, as well as in white collar even, and bankruptcy. So lots of things going on in Dallas. Family law and commercial and insurance litigation in Austin. So if that's where you want to be. Tarrant County, family law and real estate. In Houston, personal injury, as well as insurance defense in San Antonio. Commercial bankruptcy as well as commercial litigation. And that's a second position with a firm that we just were able to place someone with. So that's a growing firm. That's exciting in San Antonio. And then in Tyler, IP and commercial litigation, which actually that could be based in other cities if remote work works for you. And then transactional as well for Tyler. So lots of things happening around the state of Texas, and the legal market is thriving right now. So if any of these sound interesting to you or maybe someone you know, please get in touch with me, Daniel at varsitysearch.com. All right, today we are in Houston where our guest is Erin Rodgers. Erin is a Super Bowl winning quarterback with the Green Bay hang on, back up. No. ERIN. Just messing around. Erin is an entertainment lawyer and a shareholder at Rodgers Selvera. Her practice focuses on business counseling and formation, intellectual property, contract, drafting, review, negotiation, as well as licensing, particularly within the music industry. Erin is a musician herself and is a classically trained clarinetist who also plays the piano, the accordion, guitar, and has vocals. She does it all. She also works with nonprofit organizations, particularly in the arts, to help them organize and obtain tax-exempt status, among other services. And she's also served on the Texas Entertainment and Sports Law Council, of which I am serving currently. And so it's been good to connect with her on that as well. All right, let's hop into our conversation with Erin Rodgers on today's Monday Mentors episode of Lone Star Lawyers. Erin Rodgers joins us right now. Erin, thanks so much for coming on the show today. We appreciate it.
Sure, happy to be here.
Well, let's start by letting the folks listening hear a little bit about your firm and your practice and what all you do. So tell us about that.
Okay, sure. So my firm is Rodgers Selvera. I have a partner, Sergio Selvera. We actually have an interesting story of how we started this firm. He is also a lawyer, obviously, but at the time when we met each other, he was not practicing law. He had stopped to start a record label and was also working on some film projects. And Wow. He came to an event where I was speaking, and then I was his lawyer for a while. And then after a while, he decided he wanted to get back into practicing law, and here we are. So anyway, it's just the two of us. Cool. It's primarily entertainment law. We represent across the board a lot of musicians, filmmakers, TV projects, writers, all kinds of stuff. And then I also do a lot of nonprofit formation work and everything tangential to those things. So intellectual property and other contractual stuff. Just don't make me go to court. We're good. So.
Just stay out of court, right? That's awesome. Well, how did you find your way into that? Because I think as I talk to folks that are either, at the beginning of their career, or for sure when I spent time in career services at the law school, entertainment law, sports law, which is more of what I went into, was certainly a popular area to kind of, dig into and figure out, could I do this? Is there room for that? Or how would I go about doing that? So I'm curious to hear your story as to how you found your way into entertainment law.
I actually have a music degree, and I still perform as well. Outside of my law practice, I'm in a few bands. I do theater work, composition, arrangement, and whatnot. So I got into this through the art direction. And when I was in college, I ended up switching my major to music business because at some point I realized practicing clarinet 12 hours a day was not for me. Like I wanted to play, but maybe I also wanted to do other things. And I really loved my copyright class. So I decided maybe this was the route to get into the industry, to go into law practice and do that. And honestly, when I went to law school, I didn't even know if I would want to practice law. I didn't know any lawyers. I just thought I wanted to go into the entertainment business, and that was an extra benefit beyond just getting an MBA. But I actually really liked it. But that's helped me build my practice and to get to know clients and stuff. Is a lot of times it's people that I know from performing, stuff like that. You know, we're in a theater production together, and they're like, "Oh, you're also a lawyer? I have this thing going on." So.
Yeah. Well, and between Austin's kind of artsy vibe, I know you're in Houston, you operate out of Texas, but how has the geographic component worked for you over these years? As obviously a lot of music and art, you think about Nashville maybe, and you think about obviously LA and New York and other things, but Austin's been a hotbed in recent decades as well. Talk just about how does that matter? Does anyone even pay attention to where anyone is, or how has that worked?
Houston is the fourth largest city in the country. So, of course, there's a lot of art here and a lot of music business. And I think Austin has a better marketing department that it's convinced everyone that all of the art business is there, but there's a ton of it here in Houston. And that was a message I heard a lot when I told people this is what I wanted to do. They're like, "Oh, so you're moving to New York or LA?" And I was like, "No." And they're like, "So you're moving to Austin?" I'm like, "No." There's already tons of people doing this in Austin. So,
Yeah.
and there's plenty of business here. But you're right that it also sort of doesn't matter where you are. We have clients that aren't in Houston or aren't in Texas. And a lot of this stuff is more federal issues anyway, and, cross state line contract review. So it doesn't matter so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and then the industry itself, I mean, gosh, you think about how it's evolved over time. Think about the music industry specifically, and in the way that the business is conducted and the way the formats have changed and all of that. Has that been a source of just new opportunities for you as a lawyer in the space, or has it been a source of frustration in some ways as you're the artist as well and trying to keep up with all of that? How's that going?
Both. But again, I do think that's another area where being an artist helps me, is I'm putting out my own music too. So people are like, what's going on in streaming right now? And well, actually, I just put my stuff out. So here's what I did this time, It does keep it more interesting. There are certainly days when I'm like, why can't this all just be the same? I teach an entertainment law class at Houston Community College, and I was just having a conversation with my supervisor there about the book I'm supposed to be using. And it's not a new book. And he was like, well, why don't you like this book? And I'm like, so many things have changed since this book came out 6 years ago or whatever. Like nothing works like that. It's not so relevant. Even just the copyright stuff has changed so much that it's not, it's so dynamic. And that does keep it interesting. But sometimes I just wish it would stop for a minute.
Yeah. So, how many times is TikTok mentioned in that textbook, I wonder?
0, unfortunately.
And it's a fairly significant component of the music business in 2021
Absolutely.
now, it seems like.
Which is part of why I like teaching so much, is that my students will keep me on my toes with that stuff. One of my students, the former students, he's graduated now and is off doing all kinds of amazing stuff, but he works for a big record label now. It's like an A&R person, sort of. Don't exactly call it that these days. But anyway, I talked to him about it and I was like, how are you placing music these days, especially in the pandemic? And he was like, TikTok and Fortnite. So,
I mean, just that's so wild. Think about that. I wouldn't even have thought Fortnite. I'm not a gamer. I don't play Fortnite. I know what it is. Same. That's about all.
Exactly. So I'm like, thank you. I would not have thought of that either.
Wow, that is so interesting. Yeah. And then I've also started to pay attention to some of the, NFT and crypto stuff, and watching as artists and musicians are starting to kind of play with that, and whether it's delivering their music through NFTs or even just things like almost kind of creating fan club type things to holders of NFTs. So it's just watching that area kind of take hold in the entertainment industry as well, and music as well. Has been fascinating. I don't know if you've how much of that's come across your desk in terms of crypto and NFT, but I'm super interested in paying attention to that as well.
I haven't had to deal with it from a legal standpoint, but I have had a few clients where we've had conversations about it. And I do have one client that's not what I represented him for, but he's into buying things that way, and is always posting like, I just bought this artwork NFT, So
Wow. Yeah. It's just a whole new world.
Yeah.
So, but a whole new world every 6 years. Like you're saying, like the textbook's 6 years old, and 6 years from now, it's going to look different probably.
Right. Yeah.
So you had a background in a history in the arts before switching and going into law, and maybe some people have that. A lot of people probably do not. That would be interested in practicing in the area. What's I'm sure you have people ask young lawyers and law students. Your students ask you about how to get into it. What's your general advice to law students or new lawyers about how to try to build a practice and a career in entertainment law?
Well, these aren't exactly specific, but I think one thing is just people would always say like, oh, that's going to be really hard to go into. That's a really niche thing. But isn't everything? I mean, why someone's going to do it, and most specialized things are exactly that. So why not you, you know? And the other thing that it's cheesy, but someone said to me one time that has really stuck with me, and I really find it happening, is do something every day that gets you to whatever it is you're trying to accomplish, because you don't always see that thing come back to you that day. Like just today, I got an email from a guy I met, I don't know how many years ago. And he was like, I remember you from this thing a million years ago. Are you still practicing entertainment law? I need you now. I finally got this TV deal. And I'm like, yes.
Oh.
So it's things like that. Just, following up with someone, going to an event, posting something somewhere, reading an article. You never know which little thing is going to be the thing that leads to something else.
That's right. No. One of the questions I get about sports law stuff is sports law really, its own practice area? Is everything, kind of specific to that? Or are you just doing contracts that happen to involve sports entities? Or are you just dealing with torts that have to deal with, or breaches of contract that have to do with sports organizations or players or whatever? Or is there actually sports law that operates kind of in its own sphere? How do you look at that when it comes to the area of entertainment law?
I don't know what answer you've given, but it's probably similar in that it really is just an amalgamation of other things that already exist. Intellectual property being a big one, copyright law, and corporate law, which has become something I never expected to like, but I really do. Like, I enjoy the LLC aspect and setting up partnerships, but that's a huge part of it that I didn't foresee going into this. But it's just those things, which is also helpful because our practice is probably, 70 or 80% entertainment law, but it does let us step out and do these other things like trademarks for things that aren't related. Or I did a real estate contract a simple real estate contract last week. I wouldn't want to do something super complicated, but I've read so many contracts, I can read a contract.
Well, I'll tell you.
I don't think it's just one thing. So.
Yeah. No, I definitely give a similar answer, and the only real exception to that is something like the NCAA manual is a very specific sports law item. It doesn't really play into anything else. So like if we're looking at are there lawsuits related to this NCAA issue or whatever, then that's a fairly specific, even though we're probably dealing with antitrust or something else that's more of a traditional legal area. And then I was excited this semester, I'm teaching right now, to be able to plop out, okay, now we do have a Texas statute on name, image, and likeness, which is pretty specific to the sports world and to college athletes. And so while for a long time it's always been this like compilation of all traditional areas, it's been fun in the last couple of years to get some very specific sports specific related legislation on the books and that kind of thing, and agents we have some sports agent specific as well, and so that's fun. But I was going to mention too that the combination you started with, where you talked about having some nonprofit work as another big component or a significant component of your practice. I've known some others that operate in the sports law world that having that nonprofit side is actually a nice complement to, I don't know if this is what's making up your practice in terms of clientele, but like, having sports agents that do sports law and have athletes or coaches as clients on the sports side, then also have a natural, relationship with those same folks to maybe set up a nonprofit to help their hometown, whatever, and that winds up feeding another part of a practice. And so there are some nice, synergies that can happen, it seems like, between clients that are maybe entertainment, sports related, and then also some nonprofits.
Yeah, there's a lot of overlap. And also, especially being in the arts world, sometimes depending on the media that they're working in, nonprofit is the way to go anyway. Like theater companies, most of the time,
Yes.
that's going to be the way you're going to operate, whatever it is you're doing, regardless. So
yeah, no, for sure. Is there anything happening in entertainment law, copyright, trademark, the areas that you focus on that's sort of new and novel that you're like from a legal standpoint? Are there any new cases or any new statutes or just any new things that you're paying attention to that would be good for people to know about?
Yeah, something I'm really excited to see how it goes. Well, excited and curious, I'm skeptical, is the new copyright royalty board thing. I'm probably getting the name wrong, but essentially the short version of this is right now, usually if you have copyright infringement, whether or not you've registered your copyright, that's a federal court case. So a lot of times people don't sue each other over copyright infringement because it's so expensive, because you have to file a federal claim, you have to hire a lawyer who can go to federal court, then you're dealing with all of that. So there's so much smaller stuff that just flies under the radar, or people just decide not to prosecute because it's not going to be worth it. So with this new policy, it will go directly through the Copyright Office through a panel. It's supposed to launch in December. We'll see if that happens. But it's essentially a small claims copyright court, like a mediation process.
Yeah.
I'm interested to see how it goes because I can see how that can be abused on one hand. And also you're going to have a lot of people who were getting away with stuff for a long time that now are not going to get away with it, for better or for worse. You know, I don't love every aspect of the copyright law. I'm not here to defend everything that it stands for, so I don't want it to come across that way.
Sure.
But I do certainly have clients who have legitimately been infringed and not had the money to do something about it because it just wasn't financially viable for them. So we'll see how that goes. And the other part of it is that the party that's being the allegedly infringing party can opt out of it, and that does not preclude you from then suing in federal court. But I'm also interested to see how many alleged infringers decide it's worth it for them to go through this process and maybe have to pay, and how many of them are just like, no, come get us.
Right.
So,
right.
I have no guess on how that's going to go, because it would cost them less money too, you know, because they don't have to hire their lawyer. But if they're Disney or something, they're just going to not mess with that. I don't think. I mean, I really don't know. So I'm interested to see. But I have been telling clients lately, you know, I represent a lot of artists who are, whether they're video artists or musicians, they are using pieces of other people's things. And they're like, should I license this? And I'm like, technically, yes. And also, you should be aware that now somebody might actually find it worthwhile to come after you. So consider that when you're making your risk choice. So.
Yeah. So in the small claims process, is there a person or like an administrative law judge type person or a panel, or who's the decision maker? There's a panel. Yeah. The Copyright Office is supposed to be putting together that panel. I'm not completely up on the status of who is on that panel and if they've made that step. But yeah, there is a panel. Wow, that'll be very interesting to see, like you said, as it comes into being, and how frequently it gets used or abused, or just all. I just have no guess. I want to watch and no estimations as to whether or not this is going to go well or poorly, or if people are even going to use it, or they're going to get so many cases they're going to regret ever setting it up. I don't know. Right. Yeah, I know. Like that's all these cases that we read in the slippery slope argument of the floodgates of the litigation are a lot of times rationale for judges to not go a certain way on a case. Yeah. And this seems like it's could a floodgate opening type of process. We'll see. Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Okay. Thanks for that. And so I want to ask you a little bit about working with young lawyers and associates and people that are just getting started, and get some thoughts for them in terms of how to develop their career and become the best versions of themselves. That's kind of what we want to talk about a little bit. And so when you've worked with associates and newer attorneys in the past, what are a couple of things that they can do to stand out and to impress and to kind of get on the right track?
So I have a two-part answer to that question. Historically, I just want to say I used to work for Texas Accountants and Lawyers for the Arts, and that is where I got a lot of my experience. I was their staff attorney, and I took on a lot of cases. And back when I worked there, they let me take essentially whatever cases I wanted. So I got a lot of experience trying different things. I was also in charge of hiring interns there. So I have some thoughts on that process. But the other reason I'm bringing that up is if somebody is trying to get experience in entertainment law, that's a good way to do it because you can get on their volunteer roster and they will help you. They don't do litigation. You're usually not going to get anything too terrifying or too time consuming. So it's a good way to get some practice on reviewing contracts, doing trademarks, whatever. As far as people, so at Tala, I really do like teaching people and taking the time to help them figure out what they're doing. And I had the luxury of doing that there because it was a nonprofit and, we had time for that. So in that case, what I was looking for were more people who were just interested in this. They didn't necessarily need to have that experience. They just needed to show us somehow about why they felt like they needed to be there. Either I used to play the flute or I love watching movies and I would just love to be involved in this or whatever it was. In my own practice, though, the thing is a lot of our cases, because of the nature of our work, are short. Like this is not an ongoing litigation problem where I can spend an hour getting you into it, but then you're going to have 24 hours of work going forward. It's more like I need help with a trademark or can you please review this 2-page contract? So the thing that I need now is people who already have some degree of understanding, because if it's going to take me as long to explain to you what I need you to do as I could have just done it myself, then that's not super helpful. But we do have a couple people that we use to do some overage work because we have been really busy. But I struggle with that in my heart because I would love to take on people who are just getting started out in this, but it's hard to sometimes take the time to do that. Unless I can say like, let me teach you how to do a trademark. Okay, now you can do all the trademarks. But someone who has some sort of knowledge going in that is not going to take me more time to explain the 1-hour project to than it takes to do.
What's a piece of advice that you received when you were in the early stages of practice that has stuck with you and is something that you still carry with you and would be good to pass on?
Oh, that's a great question. Entertainment law related or just
anything? No, it could be anything. Yeah.
Other than the thing I already said about just doing something every day to get there, something that I struggle personally with that I'm finally getting a little better at is just knowing the value of the services that I offer. And, I had a friend who's like, you're way undercharging at some point. And I was like, but I don't know. And he's like, I'm charging twice what you're charging and people don't blink at it. And I'm like, okay. But now I see the way that that's harmful, not because you're trying to overcharge your clients, but there is a certain level of judgment when you're not charging enough that maybe you're not good at it. So whether or not you are. So that was an important conversation that helped me get past that a little bit. So,
yeah. Well, and no, I'm glad you mentioned that because that can, be something that impacts younger lawyers as they're trying to figure out what they should be, looking for in terms of salary, but then also as they develop their own business and start thinking about how much they bill out their rates, that kind of thing. It's always part of, what you're doing as a lawyer is valuing your time and your expertise, your skills and all of that. So I think it's definitely something that everyone should be thinking about. Sometimes I talk to lawyers that are overvaluing their abilities, and there's always this, just for where the market is on compensation and things like that. So it's a lot about expectation setting and making sure that we're on the same page and that kind of thing. But no, it works both ways though. Definitely people wind up undercharging and undervaluing themselves. It's a personality thing. And I think a lot of times and just past experience that you've had, I do think in general that it seems like for whatever reason, men tend to overvalue themselves and women tend to undervalue themselves. So like I'm I feel like I'm trying to.
Generally true, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the hypocrisy of the situation on my own part is that I'm always telling my clients the same thing. I'm like, you need to be charging more. You're worth more than this. What do you
Yeah.
think this contract should be like 3 times as much? Let me call them. And they're like, what do I owe you? And I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, pay me when you can. Just run up to that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Tacos
no.
is fine.
Well, and another thing too is, setting rates appropriate for the type of and quality of work that you do also dictates the clientele that you have and the clients that you have.
Mm-hmm.
And, if people are just wanting to pay the absolute bare minimum amount of money they can for a lawyer, that also is an indication of potentially what kind of client they might be. Not all the time, but it's certainly at least a little bit of a yellow flag.
I've learned that lesson. I send those people to Tala. Well, and a lot of times I'm upfront about that too. Like at this point, if I think somebody legitimately has an issue and legitimately can't afford me, I'll tell them up front, like, go to Tala, go get a pro bono lawyer.
Yeah, that's right. And yeah, I think for especially, man, when you're working in entertainment and working with artists, obviously so many are not, able to pay lawyers and not able and just getting started and trying to catch that break and trying to, and so it's not that they would be bad clients because of, it's just the nature of the business that they've chosen.
Right.
And so that's a little different situation,
and that's where I internally struggle also as an artist.
I know.
Like with corporations and things, I'm like, whatever. But with other artists, I'm like, I feel you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what about, are there things that you think are like no-nos that you see young lawyers doing, or just issues that you think younger lawyers are facing that they're not handling properly or could do better at? What's maybe some either pet peeves or just anything that you see in something like that around young lawyers?
Oh, that's a great question. Haven't seen any particular issues. I work with a couple of young lawyers and they've both been lovely.
Yeah, good.
And in fact, they've been helpful to me because they're the ones that are like, do you ever remember to post on your firm's Facebook page? And I'm like, no. You're right,
Yeah. No, that's good. Well, you referenced earlier about having served on as a hiring attorney for when you were hiring interns earlier. Yeah. And so I would love to ask you a little about that. And thinking about when you're looking at things like resumes or cover letters or things like that, are there things that jump out to you as potentially beneficial for candidates versus things that are troublesome, or things that you are looking for positively or negatively?
Absolutely. So when I worked at Tala, we would usually get about 75 resumes every semester for 3 or 4 positions. So I had to be pretty cutthroat with that. The ones that I would put on the top of the pile, just due to the nature of the business, were people who either, again, had some sort of experience in the arts or the nonprofit world, or justified to me in a legitimate way why they were interested, that didn't feel like they were making it up because they needed an internship.
Yeah.
This is why I'm interested in arts. Like I said, I watch a movie every weekend and I've always wanted to know about, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Also, and maybe this is just my personality personally, because I love practicing law. I really do love my job. I don't hate Mondays, but I also do 400 other things and I love those too. And I feel like that's part of my appeal to my clients, but also what makes my life work. And so I would really jump down to the bottom of the other interest section. And I was interested in the people that were like, I'm in law school, but I also bake cupcakes and I like skydiving. And, I'm like, you're interesting and I want to meet you. Like, how did you make all these things work together?
Yeah.
The only resume that I ever just immediately threw in the trash was, I got a resume from this guy and his whole background was in like math and engineering, which is fine. But we were an arts nonprofit. So I talked to him and I was like, can you tell me why you were interested in working here? Because I don't see it from the information you gave me, but benefit of the doubt. And he was like, I've always wanted to work in a small office. And I was like, no, No, that doesn't, no, okay. I mean, if that was like an additional point on top of all the other stuff, okay, fine, but what?
That's to be the
That
lead
was a weird
answer to
one. I
that
was like,
question is
no, I think you didn't think about this at all, really. You just applied to
yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
So, and that's the
Well,
other thing. Like, I can tell when you've written me a letter that you just sent to everyone, at least change some of it to be like, I am interested in your job. Your job sounds fun to do. Like, why, you know? So,
yeah. So a couple of things on that. I mean, good for you that you even, you talked to the one student or candidate because you said you threw out the resume on spec, but you didn't. You talked to him, so that's
I
good.
talked to him for about 5 seconds, and then I was like, okay, no.
And then, when it comes to cover letters, it is amazing. I continue to get the comments all the time from employers and law firms and so forth that they can just tell, or at least they say they can tell when the candidate has just basically copy and pasted and sent the same letter to every single place they're applying to.
Yep.
And it's just so obvious to them. They recognize it. And so I tell candidates all the time, and not everybody asks for a cover letter anymore, but to the extent that they do, that you got to make it tailored to that firm and to that position. And it doesn't take a lot of effort really, because I think you're right. Like, it is just changing it a little bit. You can leave like the 3 out of 4 paragraphs that are talking maybe about your background and why you're wanting to, but then like that one paragraph, like just add one that addresses
Make it clear you at least looked at the website and say, I saw that you like this, or just one thing even.
Yeah.
Go so far.
That's right. And some of that is, I think, just I think some law firms, frankly, nowadays ask for cover letters really just for the purpose of weeding out people that aren't really serious about it and aren't really, wanting to put forth any effort at all into the process, and that's an actual strategy of selecting their talent. It's not even so much what the letter is as much as the person is willing to take the time to write a letter specific to us. Like, that culls down 80% of the candidates right there. That's out. And then now we've kind of narrowed it down.
Same.
I think
we didn't require cover letters, but I definitely gave some extra points to the ones who took the time to write a legitimate one. So
yeah. And I wonder too, like, as you looked at resumes and cover letters, when you see things like either typos or formatting errors or issues with the actual, presentation of the documents, what's your reaction or response when you see that kind of stuff?
So I've changed my opinion on that a little bit over the years. I instantly am turned off by that. I don't, especially in a resume, like, come on.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I've been teaching for enough years now that I also am privy to seeing these students who they just don't have the educational background. Like, they're not dumb necessarily just because they keep spelling the same word wrong or whatever, that I've slacked off on caring about that quite as much as I used to in the past. Of course, if it's to the point where I think you're going to write an email on my behalf and make it look like I don't know what I'm talking about, that's a thing.
Right.
But I do give people a little bit of flexibility on that because I don't always think it's their fault that they didn't get it. So
yeah. Wow. Yeah. It's that's definitely a thing that continues to come up. So that's good.
I mean, by the time you're a lawyer, hopefully you've figured this out. But
yeah, for sure.
But yeah, my college students, it's just, I mean, I came from a privileged suburban background and had really good training and all of that stuff, and they don't always. So I try to give them a little bit of flexibility on that. But it is if your resume has typos in it, like, maybe you need to fix that.
We're still, I think, in the middle of a conversation about work-life balance in the legal industry, and the pandemic's kind of thrown that a little bit of a curveball in terms of everyone's kind of been forced to work from home, the last year and a half, at least some, if not completely, and that's kind of part of it's a point in work-life balance, being able to do some flexible work arrangements, that kind of thing. Certainly not all of work-life balance. I'm just curious where you think we are right now in the legal profession as it pertains to that, and where do you think we're headed, especially once the pandemic ends and we move back to some kind of normalcy, if that's ever actually going to happen. We're talking on September 30th, by the way, if you're listening later to this. So
yeah, 2021. So
yeah, I guess I should say we've been in this 2 years.
For multiple years.
Yes, sorry, I should add the year now. Ugh.
So personally, I haven't had a lot of issues in the pandemic that changed my answer to this, because I was already working from, well, I have an office, but like I mostly work by myself. I don't go there that often. That's still true. It was true before.
Yeah.
But the things, so on one hand, I think I personally do pretty well with work-life balance, but it's been a choice, and it was a choice from day one. Like I said, I was already an artist. I occasionally go on tour, and I'm going to be gone for a couple weeks. I'm in a show right now, and I have rehearsals at night, and I can't talk to you at 6 p.m. You know, I have a rehearsal. And I hold that stuff sacred for myself, and I've done pretty well at it. And the other thing that I personally do for my own work productivity that I find works well is to prioritize my own things on top of my law practice, is that I'll make a list of things I want to do that day. And it'll be like, number 1, do Sammy's contract. Number 2, practice piano for 20 minutes. And then I'll use like a random number generator on Google. And Google says I have to practice piano now. So whatever, it's 3 p.m. on Tuesday, I'm going to go play the piano. Google said. So that's how I get both things done with, and still manage to make time for myself and for my other things that are just as important to me as my law practice, even though it's been really busy right now. So I've mostly just been doing work. But in general, the struggle that I find is that with there being so many more productivity tools, we put so much work on ourselves that isn't our actual job and isn't billable. And sometimes at the end of the day, I worked a solid 9 or 10 hours, and I look back and I'm like, what did I do? And half of it was answer emails, schedule stuff, organize files. Like with all of these things that make things easier, we try to do more, and it's not really helpful. Like I sort of am jealous of lawyers in the 70s or whatever that just had typewriters and had administrative assistants to do all of that, because I just have to do all of it.
Right.
And I don't always think that's a good thing. That we can do everything ourselves doesn't mean we should. And I did take my own advice. So
That's right. That's right. You made me think of something completely off topic but related, which is a comedy routine where a guy was talking about the self-checkouts at the grocery stores, and like how we've just given up on having other people do stuff. Like, just do it yourself. Just like we were talking about doing things ourselves. We're teaching. I checked groceries when I was in high school as a summer job, and it's like we've made all this progress and worked all this way over the last 40 years, and now we're back. I'm checking my own groceries after 35 years.
Right. And that's all fine until you're tired or something.
Yeah.
Do everything.
But I'll keep going into that self-checkout line. I prefer it, but yeah. Well, let's do our rapid fire questions here. Just kind of one word or one phrase, quick hitters, and
okay.
We'll go from there. All right. So name the one trait or characteristic that you most want to see in an associate.
Being, what's the word I'm trying to think of? You can think on your feet.
Yeah.
Adaptable.
There you go. Yeah. What habit has been key to your success?
Work-life balance.
There you go.
Not just working all the
at 3 p.m. Use that Google tool. I like that. Well, speaking of that, your favorite app or productivity tool?
My pen and paper list and a random number generator.
That's awesome. What would you list first in the interests section of your resume? We talked about that section being important. Since you've got a lot of different things and you're an artist, let's be specific. What would be the first thing on the list of your interest section?
Playing music.
Playing music, yeah. And what were the instruments that you
clarinet, accordion, guitar, piano, and vocals.
Oh my gosh, all of it. Oh wow. Okay.
I couldn't pick one. So.
Yeah, that's all right. And then lastly, your favorite legal movie?
It's cliche, but Legally Blonde.
That's not cliche at all. It's probably like it is probably one of the 3 or 4 most popular answers for sure.
Things are cliche because they're good sometimes. So
that's exactly right. Well, Erin, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to come talk with us. We appreciate it. And I wish you and your firm all the best.
Thank you. It's nice talking to you.
All right. My thanks again to Erin Rodgers for joining us on the show today. If you enjoyed this episode, would you consider doing 2 things for me? Would you subscribe so you don't miss an episode? And would you rate and review the podcast in Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen? If you have thoughts about the show or suggestions, or if I could help you in any way, please email me directly, daniel@varsitysearch.com. Also, don't forget, if you are interested in any of the opportunities that I mentioned at the top of the show, or just want to visit about the market or what might be out there for you, please get in touch with me. I would be happy to visit. All right, that's it for today's episode of Lone Star Lawyers. Thanks again so much to each of you for listening. I'm Daniel Hare with Varsity Search, and we'll talk with you next time.